Did I receive that? Bring out his chestnut.
I'll give him a copy.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you.
that's the latest, I guess. Okay. I want to call the meeting to order. Calling the Monday, November 19th, 2018 meeting of the advisory board. First thing on the agenda actually is an appointment of a secretary, and it's not really an appointment. I'm not appointing anybody, I'm just asking if somebody would like to be secretary to take Eric's spot. Because Eric was at a lot of work.
No.
No.
The redevelopment authority will continue to provide clerical support, correct?
Oh, yeah, no, the secretary doesn't.
Yes.
No, yeah, right. Oh, yes, they do. They're
This is
supposed to-
just statutorily, you're supposed to have a
A
secretary.
secretary, it says it in the,
I'll volunteer.
okay, yeah, no, there's no, you don't have to, just fill in the vacancies. Okay, good. Okay, I'm just gonna put down that Joseph Shea.
I think you have to vote it in.
Oh, I do? Okay. Did somebody make a
I
motion?
move Joseph Shea, secretary.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, I also think at some point too, we usually do, we vote on, you know,
Reorganization.
yeah, so.
I make a motion to reappoint Carol Calberg as chairperson.
I second the motion.
See, there's a lot of
Thank you.
volunteers for that.
It's a railroad job.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna put it on for the next agenda, but we don't have to bother.
The regulation's always in order.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so voted unanimously. And then we have a treasurer, no, secretary, what is it?
You did secretary, you did the
Vice chair?
Vice chair.
vice chair.
Oh, yeah.
I'll nominate myself.
You nominate Bruce Hughes?
I
Okay.
second the nomination.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, we're all set. Thank you very much. Okay, next is a discussion.
So, the first item on there is the FY18 financials.
Thank you for
And
this.
we are actually just finishing up the audit right now with Malloy and Lynch, Laney, and they're just about to issue financial statements on it. We've got a draft of them. So all I have really before you today is the internal draft of the financials. And there's a couple just items that kind of glare out at you, and that the first one is there's a deficiency in the revenue, and that's because the developer didn't pay the second half of their fee until this year,
Okay,
missing the end of the cutoff for fiscal 18.
okay,
So we're short, and our revenue's by $228,000 from what we estimated.
Now, that's the last line.
We have received it since, they did pay, I think it was August 1st was the date that I actually received it.
So you should have an overage the following year.
Possibly.
All things
The
being
way it
equal.
works out with the revenue, as I had explained to you earlier, and some of you may be aware, is that they really back end what the budget is.
Yep.
And if you take a look down at the next section for expenditures, we spent quite a bit less. They didn't really fulfill all the positions that were available last year, and there were some savings throughout the year on expenditures. So we actually ended up with an excess of $294,000 of expenditures. So if you net the two out, we're actually in an excess position of $66,000. And there are some audit adjustments that will be against that, so my guess is it'll be just about wiped out by the time we're done with a few of their audit adjustments for timing. And with that being said, it offsets the amount of actual revenue that we collected from the developer, so there really would be no further amount, and the collection of the first item for this year We're actually speaking to them about reserving a portion of that forward for certain items that they've asked us to do for revolving type funds for any type of projects that they're on that need review of any type.
Is the developer on schedule with his payments for fiscal year 19 so far?
Well, the fact that they've prepaid a portion of this up front, we have just billed them now for not only what we're estimating for 2019, but in addition, we decided that it would be prudent for us to include the Parkway bond on there because of the fact that the state has made it clear that this year could be the first year that they're actually going to ask us for the payment due on June 30th. I'm going to get into that a little further as we get into one of the following subjects. The other item down the bottom is actually for fiscal 18. If you did take into consideration the fact that we had bond payments due of $1.5 million, there would actually be a deficiency of $1.5 million roughly as well for fiscal 18. We also had a transfer, if you remember, $400,000 that you recommended to the board of directors last year. That was transferred to the stabilization fund, but that was from free cash, so it does not affect the annual revenue.
So that transfer did go through?
It did, yeah, and I made that go through as of, I believe it was voted the middle of June. The next item being the supplemental budget. You actually have the measure of the budget that was made for fiscal 19 on the next page, which is the macro version of it by section, $3.9 million. If you take a look at the following page, it gets into the detail of what the appropriations are. I have not included the revenue at this point in time because they have not voted it, and we've got a couple items that are still pending on the revenue side of the fiscal 19 budget. The budget originally you had seen was the third column over, the FY19 budget, which I believe you had recommended to them. There was small adjustments of $1,500 on the savings from the audit that was expected, and an additional $1,500 that is being spent on payroll services, so it's a wash there. And then on the second page, you'll see that the East-West Parkway bond debt service is included at $1.692 for the payment that is expected to be called at the end of the year, which will bring the total amount of debt service up to $2.8 million from the prior year of $1.1. We have put them on notice, as I told you, and billed them on an estimate to the developer. In fairness to them, that this is quite an increase, that they should be made aware that they may be responsible for that amount.
What's been their reaction?
Yeah.
They understood. They knew that there was a time that this was going to be coming. This would be the year. We've been working with them to get information on the clawback portion of this to reduce it. And the way that's figured out is we look for a net new state tax revenue. I'm not sure if you all recall this, but when this project was sold to the communities, it was sold on the basis that it would grow rather quickly. And the amount of tax revenue that would be brought into the state would cover the amount of the parkway. As you know, we hit the recession right away. So the state graciously allowed us to hold the payments on those. The deficiency was calculated each year. There were some small payments that were requested at the very beginning, but then they stayed the amount of the debt up through fiscal 18. And during the period through 13, we calculated the amount of tax revenue that was generated through either the sales of materials to do the buildings on the property and the labor that was used in it as well for the income taxes. It's dramatically less than what we had hoped for at this point in time, but it did have some effect of a few $100,000 each year on it. There's been decrease in the amount of building since those years. So I do not expect the deficiencies, which we are working with LSTAR now to calculate back from 14 through 18. We've asked them for detail. All we've got is really a summary at this point from LSTAR. We're working with the Department of Revenue and Administration and Finance in the state in order to get all on board and have it certified by the Department of Revenue. And then the A&F makes the decision on what they're going to do as far as reducing it or asking us to pay at the end of this fiscal year or staying it again until the end of fiscal 20 or further is what our hopes are, considering the pace that it's been going along. What we've also not come to terms on is how the amount that has been deferred is going to be paid back. We know what the amount is each year, as I've got the bond payment in here, but how they're going to address what has been deferred so far is yet to be specifically addressed. There was a memorandum of agreement with them that allowed us to take it out through 2042, but I'm not so sure where that will end up once A&F talks to us about where we're sitting right now. And that was, I got ahead of myself on that one. The state audit report, we did follow up with them on all their points. Basically, every single thing that we had asked for had been addressed in one way or another. One was staffing, and we hired an executive director, and I believe you've all met Conley's with me. He brings a lot of experience from working as executive director down the Cape Cod Commission, and also hiring me on for my position. And as you know, Jim is still on as your land administrator, and he comes with quite a bit of institutional knowledge. And we're all very grateful that he's here because he's been immeasurable at helping us out.
I just have a question. Is there any discussion about hiring anybody else?
Yes, there is, and I'll let our executive director speak about that.
Okay.
And the last thing I just wanted to mention was the other item that was crucial to the state audit was doing something about making us, not bulletproof, but at least trying to weather through any type of storm with a master developer, either pulling out or being let go. And your recommendation for the $400,000 for a start was a great help. Actually, you recommended more than that, but the board of directors voted $400,000. I hope that I get your continued support on that this year after free cash is certified. And that will make us,
When will free cash be certified?
I'm working on it right now. I'm assuming that I'm gonna have it out probably by the end of next week because I need to get it done for the tax rate to be certified. I was waiting also on any audit adjustments, which they were just sent over to me on Friday. And once I get a chance to vote those through.
How long will $400,000 keep the current operation going?
Well, we actually, if you take into consideration the fact that we also should have free cash, we had a wash this year on the operating budget, as you saw, pretty much. If you take a look at that, plus the fact that we had, I think it was $2 million originally, we spent some of that down, we used it to do the transfer here. I'm hoping that we're gonna end up in the same position. With that being said, we should be able to weather probably at least a year of time without a master developer, possibly up to a year and a half. I'll have a better picture of that once we get our free cash certified.
Okay, that was my question, yeah. I'll,
Roughly, I think a year and a half.
given the uncertainties at this point.
Right. But it would be better to take that money, put it in stabilization, making it harder to use throughout the year, as opposed to just having it in free cash, which we could be moved around not willy-nilly, but you get the idea. So that's it for me. I know that the executive director wanted to speak also about the status of LSTAR, and that's why that's been included in here.
But just to address the staffing issue first, we've had discussions with the board. The plan is to bring on more staffing, as was the recommendation of the advisory board. But given the status of the master developer now, and given we still have to sort of define the SRA's role going forward once we have the master developer issues settled. And if we're going to move more towards financing infrastructure, we probably need a different kind of staff setup. So I think we have good people in place right now to get us to that point where where we can talk about other staffing, but it's definitely on the agenda.
Good people in place, staff-wise, you're talking?
Yeah, between Jim,
So the three
Eric,
people that are on, okay, yes, I agree, all right, I was, fine, I agree with that, okay.
and then just to address the L-Star issue, because I'm sure you've all been aware, having read the newspapers. But, I've been on since February, and there have been issues with L-Star's performance right from when I started, and they're primarily in two categories. It's the lack of progress on commercial development. If you're looking at even a 50-mile radius of the place and look at the kind of vertical commercial development that's happened since 2014 and the absolute lack of it here, they're underperforming. And I think there are reasons why they have been underperforming. I'm not sure that they were sufficiently capitalized to do the project, and in order to get the money needed, I think they had to agree to terms for that money that weren't positive for the project, by putting the project at a disadvantage or in an uncompetitive position. And then secondly is the lack of progress on any sort of comprehensive infrastructure plan, a plan to provide permanent water or permanent sewer to the site. And again, they had AECOM working with them. They had, I think, over 18 possible ways to connect to a permanent water supply, but couldn't decide on one, which one to move forward with. So I think those are the two things that I saw initially. Lack of progress on commercial development raised a lot of red flags. Lack of progress on infrastructure raised more red flags. So as we were starting to move through some of that, I think probably because of some of our discussions with L-Star, there were subsequent sort of management issues. And you have to, all of this is in the context of a piece of legislation in 2014 that essentially took 1,400 acres of a public asset and assigned it directly to a private company with very limited public oversight. So the management issues came to the forefront. The president of L-Star in June sort of allegedly took a new position with the company. It wouldn't have anything to do with Union Point. Subsequently, there continued to be issues over ownership and control of L-Star as a company and Union Point as a project. Towards the end of the summer in August, August-September timeframe, there were two tangible manifestations of that management dispute. One was an injunction in Suffolk County against L-Star as a company because of an unpaid debt to a creditor that was substantial. That injunction prohibited L-Star from spending any more than $25,000 on the site, creating material breach of the responsibility, inability to perform with that sort of court limitation. The second was a lawsuit filed in North Carolina by the partners of L-Star, all parties except for the president, against the president. And those allegations were of fraud and mismanagement. So with those two things, with that lawsuit, that complaint filed in North Carolina, and the injunction in effect in Suffolk County, those are two serious material breaches, and at this point, without those issues being cured, an inability of the master developer to perform the dues and responsibilities under the 2014 legislation and under the development disposition agreement between the SRA and the master developer. So those are the facts, all of which are public knowledge and recorded events. And so the SRA has met 2 times in executive session to discuss our sort of interest in the real estate in general and how it factors into some of these issues, and the financial wherewithal of the master developer to perform. And so we will continue to do that. So the SRA will be meeting on Wednesday, November 28th, probably in executive session only. And then we will be meeting again on December 5th, the week after. And at the December 5th meeting, the board will be presented options and alternatives, and will consider what action the board might need to take to fulfill their responsibilities under the development and disposition agreement and their 2014 enabling legislation. So that would be my report on the status of the master developer today, but I would answer any questions that I think I can.
I have one. Is there a lawyer involved in this? Do the SRA have?
Yes.
Oh.
There, the SRA had real estate counsel during last year where some of these transactions and mortgage events took place. We are no longer using that firm, so we have hired the firm of Pierce Atwood to represent us. They have some specific expertise in land use, in understanding special legislation and breaches of statute from that. They also have specific experience with redevelopment authorities. So we have Pierce Atwood on board, and we've had some initial conversations with other specialized law firms if we were to need that kind of specialty.
That's what I was wondering. Anybody else? Go ahead.
Just a brief one. Do you know if the second meeting you mentioned, December 5th, will also be executive session, or will they discuss this at a regular meeting?
That would be a regular meeting.
I just want to make mention of that too on December 5th. If anybody is going to come, that's fine, but if we have quite a few coming to the meeting, I'd have to know so we could post it.
I plan to be present.
If you could just let me know, so, okay, so I know Joe is okay.
Just a question on Elstar, their inability to spend over the 25,000.
That's killing me.
What's that?
That's killing me.
Yeah, so is the entire organization, or is it just this, like,
At Union Point.
it's specific to Union Point? Why are they not held? Yeah, okay.
That's part of the list.
Yeah, got it. I mean, it seems like they aren't aware, senior management in their organization, I don't know where their controls are as far as knowing that they have outstanding bills to pay, they haven't paid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basic oversight of an organization.
It's a great question, but Elstar's national company
Yeah.
is their national company. They manage a lot of projects nationally, but they have a number of sort of spin-off LLCs. And so those spin-offs, and the one with just direct responsibility for Union Point is the one that's entered into the contract here, which is resulted in a creditor that has disputed.
Yeah.
That issue resulted in an injunction, so it's only that.
So they can't go up to the mothership to get any reparations.
Not at this time.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to point out there's at least two issues related to that. As I understand it from last meeting I went to, the MEPA process has stopped because the impression I got was Elstar was no longer paying the contractors they've hired to work on the MEPA project. And I believe that's several months ago. That's a state requirement. The second thing is, I believe for the last few months, the work to connect the water system here to Route 18 has also stopped, which means that the water pressure is low as far as fighting fires, which to me is a serious issue. And I brought this issue up a couple of times, and I think it's finally being admitted, but I mean, it was almost like, well, it'll go away.
I believe the land administrator might have addressed that also. at the
Jim
last meeting.
Young addressed it at the last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
Because somebody from Elstar said, well, there was this issue and this issue, and Jim said, no.
The MEPA process has had several delays in it already, and the work on that project, it hasn't I can't characterize it as having completely stopped because the transportation contract with CTPS is through the SRA. So we can continue to fund that, so that transportation part of the NEPA process continues, but the rest of it is effectively stopped. But I did have an email today, Joe, on a water issue in connection to Route 18. So there have been a couple of issues that have come up. One is the plowing of snow and ice. LSAR has sort of responsibility for that. And so issues that are related to public safety or public health, we've been pushing for LSTAR to make good on that, to find money to do that, and where they have been able to do that, they have done.
So is the snow and ice issue?
I signed a contract with I believe TNK. SRA has a contract with them for the parkway also, and they were out and they plowed last week.
Am I mistaken, but did they, I don't remember LSTAR paying last year.
Yeah,
Wasn't that all forgiven?
for
Or
the
it was
snow and
just-
ice.
Yeah,
No.
but they had outstanding bills
They
that were
did, they
forgiven,
definitely
but it
had
wasn't snow and
outstanding
ice?
bills. But those outstanding bills were, I think they were addressed in August, but they
Oh,
were,
so it was before the snow and
they were
ice.
paid
Yeah.
from last year, but, snow in January.
And this really doesn't fall under our purview, and I always try to stay with just this. But just curiously, just for my own, did LSTAR come in with a plan? Do you know, did you ever see a plan?
A master plan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
there is a master plan. The master plan's pretty good. The master plan is sort of an adaptation
Okay.
of earlier plans.
no,
It's really the execution of that plan
okay.
that has been lacking.
Okay.
It would seem to me that if I understand the MEPA process, they really couldn't complete at least on the water and sewer issues, until they've decided what alternatives they want
Yes.
to pursue. Because then they'll have to do an analysis of the impacts and the alternatives. And if they're still in the process of deciding that and they haven't landed on sort of preferred alternatives, you can't really complete that part of the analysis yet.
No, you can't. And I've been working with LSAR and pushing them on both the water and sewer issue. There are alternatives out there, and I think we've made a lot of progress because the answer to either of those, at least one of the alternatives in each of those, is going to involve participating with one of the municipalities that borders the site. And so we've made some progress in some of the discussions with those towns. We've made some progress and some clarifications in some of our discussions with the MWRA. So I think it's entirely solvable. I mean, the major infrastructure challenges to the site have answers, and they're doable. But that further, that raises the question why it hasn't been done.
They're very expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why the reason why there hasn't been a rush into it.
Yeah,
Right.
they are expensive, but one of the things that the SRA did get in 2014 bonds is, in the bill, was $175 million, really, I think, to finance the infrastructure, because if you're talking about those kind of buried costs of water and sewer treatment facilities and pipes and pumps and transportation, I don't know many private corporations that really can afford those kind of sunk costs. And so then you have to ask I had to ask myself another question, is, well, why hasn't LSTAR approached the SRA to provide that funding for the infrastructure? Because we would then have the ability to charge betterments, special assessments, and really use the tools that any municipality kind of uses.
As a public body, could you actually access the SRF, for
Yes,
instance?
the Clean Water
Which the
Trust
developer themselves couldn't do.
could not. It's guaranteed.
It seems there might be a little bit of a chicken and egg in the sense that you have to develop an infrastructure system that's capable of handling 4,000 housing units, 8 million square, whatever the build out is, but you have to put it in place now while you don't have all those revenues really coming in
Yeah.
yet, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, if you build out, you'll have them and you'll have the ratepayers and
Yeah.
you'll have to pay back those bonds, but there's a little bit of a leap of faith to put that increment of more infrastructure in place and pay for it now
Right.
against the future hope that you have the revenues,
No,
right?
that's a great point. And so we have 1,000 units that are constructed owned and occupied, constructed and occupied now, so there's like 2,000 people that live here.
Right.
So it's a community, so those build-out numbers are important. So those residents right now are served by temporary agreement with Weymouth, unaffected by the mayor's letter today.
Sure.
So they're sort of in the perfect situation now, because you have half of your rate base already. So to move and expand. So yeah, that's exactly right, but now would be the time, especially if you're looking at capital construction projects that are 3 to 5 years in the future in a best case
Seems
scenario.
like they really should be using the SRF for some of this, because there's a lot of money out there, and the state is sometimes having a hard time finding enough people to take that money
Yes, and
these days.
one of my frustrations since February is there is a lot of state money that could and should be coming to this project. But without a particular project to go and ask for the money for, we can't,
Yeah, right.
we're not accessing it. And so they're losing millions in state support for the project by not being able to decide on one project and to finish the NEPA process and go forward. So, yeah, this is the essence of the issue that we've had with Master Developer.
Paul, I'm gonna make a comment. And it's probably a good idea, it's probably fairly good that the board of directors is not here to hear this. Well, because people to develop the earlier legislation. Your role now is needed, and has been needed. When we got rid of the executive director, position was eliminated in 2014, not getting into the issue of the person and so forth, it became a disaster, because what we did is gave control of the project completely to the vendor, to the developer. And basically let these issues just fester there in the hopes that the developer was going to resolve them.
Yeah, well, I think if you just look at the facts, 2014 legislation basically conveys 1,400 acres of public asset to a private corporation, creates a much more limited public agency. That agency doesn't have an executive director for a period of time. The master developer is even engaged in the hiring process for
I
that
can
executive
believe
director. And certainly had an influence on the time frame for hiring, which leaves a board of citizen volunteers
Literally.
in charge of making executive decisions for one of the largest development projects east of the Mississippi.
Well, there's a even more fundamental issue going back beyond that. My impression was that the legislation was in large part written by the developer.
I'm not going to comment on that.
Yeah.
The other guys that come up later on.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's an unfortunate thing that, given that situation after 2014, the glass half full scenario could have been, that gave the developer an open field. He could have moved the ball 50 yards down the road,
Absolutely.
down the field in the last couple of years after that, instead of almost losing it.
Yeah,
So,
you're right, Mark. I think it's a real, they could have made.
some developers would love to have a situation where they don't have as much oversight, that they can just free to move ahead with doing it. There's a plan, they have to follow the plan, but that's their plan.
They had a plan.
When
We were told that this would facilitate the development of this place, that the plans that were in place in the past were hindering the development of this place. So we were sold on this plan, this new plan that would facilitate the development, and yet it's stalled.
Right.
The old saying, as far as, you've got to have exact plans as far as the infrastructure goes. They talk about a build out of 4,000 house units, whatever, and it's half that now. Do you really need to have firm plans in place for the rest of those houses before you can go ahead
No.
with the infrastructure for them? You don't need that.
No, I mean, if you look at sort of the map, even as the master plans evolve, and so the master plan is in a better position now, and the zoning is fixed, right? And the regulatory process is fixed. So the project has all of that going for it, which puts it in those categories at a huge advantage. But the next step is to decide on projects, and with the residential development that's in place, with the zoning that's in place, it's not that difficult to figure out. With the East-West Parkway, the Parkway in place, the infrastructure is not that hard to figure out.
So they could put the stubs in for the
Yeah.
water and the sewer. I'm just thinking there's a development down the street from my house. and it's got a projected bill out of it, I don't know, 100 units or something. But they've put all the infrastructure in place. They've run all the pipes and the stubs and stuff like that. So when demand is there, they can put everything in place. I would think that
Yeah, but here the situation is just a local distribution on the site. It's what is the source of water? It's gonna be somewhere far off the site, whether it's the Underbray to the north or Brockton or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And that's a big increment of cost that you have to sink into securing that and bring it to the site. And then the pipes that go down to the stubs is a minor amount of the overall cost. You know, so you have to size it for the ultimate size of the master plan.
Right.
And that's, you make that kind of a purchase agreement or whatever with whoever that water supplier is gonna be, and size your wastewater the same way. That's why it's kind of an incremental problem. It's like if it could be done in phases, that would be better in some ways from a financial point of view, but it doesn't lend itself well to being done in phases, I don't think.
No. No, but I mean, the project, it's where it should be, but the infrastructure's overdue at this point. The way I would characterize it.
Carol, I'd like to get back, if I could, to one thing, and that is typically, and I know that we're out of order because of the fact that we didn't get a chance to have a meeting put together. Typically, the committee votes on
Yes.
amendments to budgets, and, you know, I don't know how you feel about it, but I would appreciate it if you would give a recommendation to the changes that were made in the budget.
Do you remember that was done? We
Yes,
sent
we-
you all of that, and then we didn't get to meet, but we went before the board, and you and I were at that meeting, so it went through fine with the board, there was no problem whatsoever about it,
And
so.
outside of the addition of the bond, which I think
Right.
is prudent to do, you know, to honestly, to be able to charge the master developer, if in fact that we do have this as an expenditure this year, this is just the two minor changes of the $1,500, which wash each other out. If someone would make a motion
Yeah, I need a
and
motion for that.
approve that.
Actually, sorry, I just want to ask one, I should have asked this earlier. All fine with everything, but just the bond. Is this only this year? This isn't like the
This
aggregate of
is
the...
just this year's
Okay.
bond service.
So there's still kind of that
There
other
is
thing
an
going
amount
on there.
hanging out there, we don't know what that number is, since I can't quantify it at all. I don't know that I feel comfortable just throwing either, you know,
Okay,
6 million, which would be the accumulated total, or do they only want a few $100,000 per year, you know,
and is this the maximum it will be? So once you get new state revenues, will this number come down, or does this have an estimate of new state revenues in it?
It does not have an estimate of state revenues because we have not got that certified. We're still waiting on the master developer to provide the information to the Department of Revenue in order to make a reduction. And quite frankly, that's on them, which is why I've got it in here as a gross amount.
Okay, so it won't go any higher because it's as high as it's already as high as I look at it.
I can't say they won't go higher because of the fact that
I guess that's true.
there could be, you know, they could ask for the money that came, you know.
They could ask for all 5 years of it,
Yeah.
or whatever it is.
So-
Okay,
I just, you know, this is as close as I can get at this point. We can amend after the fact, the board of directors can revisit it at any point in time. The only issue with that is getting the revenue to match it. They can, you know, we can amend the amount that we're charging the master developer, we can use free cash, we can use a combination. And that may also, my hope would be that if that was the case where they charged us for the back years, that they would also offset it by the state, new state tax revenue, and it would be somewhat of a wash. So quite frankly, I think it brings us right back down to where this number is right now.
Howard, stay on that subject. Does LSTAR still have staff here to work on that clawback computation? There was an article a few weeks ago that the staff,
That's been resolved.
okay, so they do have
And,
staff on
but
site.
there is a reduction in staff over there. There are just a few people working. We've met with them. They've actually been very cooperative, the remaining staff with us, which has been, you know, hopeful. But, you know, the damage, quite a bit of damage has been done at this time. But they've been working with us and the state. The state's in touch with them directly also to make no bones about what it is specifically that they're looking for this, so the town isn't wasting it going down the wrong path.
Oh, good.
And then only one other item I did want to mention, besides taking a vote on that, would be, if you can't make the board of directors meetings, Ms. Parsons has recorded them and put them up on WRPS, and I urge you to, when you have a moment, take a look at them each week. If you can't be here, at least you can stay abreast of what's happening, or perhaps you take an interest in something that's coming up and you want to be vocal about it to appear. If you feel that you're going to have a quorum and you're going to act as a board,
Oh, okay.
make sure that you let Carol know that she can post the meeting on those nights.
And I would ask that nobody's really too vocal on anything that hasn't been, addressed by this board. Unless they state that this is just their own personal.
I have
decision.
spoken at the last few boards of records meetings.
But you
I-
haven't,
Not
but
as
you
not
have,
as a
right.
member of the.
Yeah, you haven't
Right.
spoken representing us.
Give my address.
Go to town.
Yes, right, so that's fine, that's not a problem at all, if anybody wants to just get up and speak, but if you address it as a member up here, I would appreciate it if you only address something that was discussed and voted on here. Oh, yes, Mary, I'm sorry.
Anyone can speak as a resident, so if they
Right.
came to the meeting,
Right.
first words out of your mouth, as a resident of such and such
Yeah.
town,
And Joe did, that was not an issue.
and then life is
And
good.
it was a very.
I think in general, if this board had a specific message we wanted to be conveyed to the board,
Right.
we would ask you to do it, or
Right.
you a designee,
Right,
so that would
right.
be kind of an official
Right,
ask.
yeah.
And then anyone else is speaking on their own citizenship, that's fine.
Yes, and that's all I just wanted to make clear. And if it wasn't official, it's yours. Okay.
So if you could make a
Oh, yeah, the
motion
motions, I'm so
for the
sorry, we had
amended
it. I
budget
think
of
Joe
$3,900,900.
So I'm making that motion.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so I
Thank
just
you
want to
very
thank you
much.
both so much for coming.
And if we were speaking on behalf of our regional planning agencies, we had to clear the process.
That's
I
right.
think that-
There's even more people
Oh,
who
status of
get.
vacancies. Well, Rockland is going, go ahead.
Yep,
Please.
We're in the process of hiring a new town accountant, and that individual will be the second person for
Oh,
Rockland.
okay.
So,
Oh, all right.
that hasn't been decided yet, but as soon as I hear, I'll let you know.
And then we still have, what are we gonna do?
Well-
We have to work on that letter. But
Yeah,
we've been waiting though since,
Exactly.
to have something.
Okay, they can't just decide without doing this in public at a board meeting, and they have to advertise if somebody wants to be on that, because that's been the problems for the past 10 years in the town, is that that's being done behind closed doors, and it has to stop.
I will convey that to the town administrator.
Yeah.
So in other words, you're saying that it has to go before a vote in Rockland?
Yep.
Oh, all right,
Okay.
okay.
Some could be, I believe Wayman can be appointed though. It depends on each
Yeah.
board.
Yeah. we
To be
will.
clear,
Yeah.
it is open and it's been out there and
Out there, and
posted,
no
I
one's
believe.
knocking down.
No, I haven't seen it posted on the bulletin board. That's where the problem lies, too.
I'll follow
Well,
up.
maybe there's been a problem and they just haven't been able to.
There's a lot of problems.
Well, they haven't just posted. I guess posting is just a minor problem.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this board seat might be one of the lesser problems.
Yeah, right, really. But, and then we have the two from the state
Right.
that we have to somehow get. Okay, but I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight.
I have a couple of questions I'd
Sure.
like to ask. Paul, has there been any consideration or thought given to whether or not we need changes to 2014 law? We've obviously talked about some problems the 2014 law created. I was never in favor of it to start with, but we have it. But should it be amended? And should this be an issue the board of directors is going to?
I don't want to stray too far from what's on the agenda.
Yeah.
I raised it.
But one of the issues that has come up in the past and has been discussed at other meetings is moving the date of reporting on the audit. And even as moving as quickly as we can, it still remains a struggle. So that's one sort of technical amendment that's been discussed in the past. But I would suggest I would assume that the advisory board put in a meeting again pretty soon after the new
Right.
year. And maybe we should put it on the agenda for
Mhm.
discussion. That would be a good thing to do, that would be helpful.
I would request one other thing, and this is not to make figure for the advisory board to vote on, obviously not tonight. I would hope that the board of directors and the SRA is keeping the all three towns updated on what is happening. I know the mayor is very well aware of what's happening, very active in this. I know Rockland is going through transition at this point, but I think at some point, the SRA and board of directors, working however they want, need to give both Abington and Rockland an update. Obviously, Rockland is more of an issue because they have much more at stake, but they also have much more responsibility. If for any reason Elstar goes out, Rockland inherits responsibilities for large, could and probably would inherit responsibility for what they do for the 42% of the base that is Rockland land, for police, fire, and so forth. And I would just hope that, I haven't heard of anything coming into the town of Abington talking about these issues.
No. But, I mean, I've been to the, as you know, to the Abington Board of Selectmen once, been to Rockland a couple of times to talk staff to staff, and then in front of the board there. Weymouth called us in a lot, right? But that's sort of on their initiative. We have some pretty regular meetings, but I agree with you, Joe, that we should, given where we are in the current circumstances, we will touch base with all three towns.
And I work with the departments, as you probably know, to keep them informed, the financial departments anyways, of what's happening from my end.
Right. And the other thing, I hate to mention this, is I assume the variation and the reviews that are going on with the board of directors will include variation if the worst case scenario happens.
Yeah, I think we've been, the state auditor's report that issued in March was pretty clear. That was the one major thing that they found lacking, was a contingency plan if something happened to the master developer. So we've actually been working pretty diligently on that. And so there are a number of alternatives, and I think we're in a much better position than we've ever been. We understand the legislation, the DEA, what our rights and responsibilities are under those two controlling documents, and we're ready to execute a number of alternatives.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'd like to hold off on the next meeting. Oh, sorry.
Can I address what Joe addressed about the MEPA process? I think what Joe meant was the notice of project change that Elstar did, that's at a stalled point.
Right.
And then the original certificate, all of the issues in the original certificate from 2007, those things have to be satisfied, and they haven't been satisfied. But I have a question. There's going to be a Navy payment coming up next month. And the Navy does like their money. Starwood tried not to pay them.
Last
It's
week,
been postponed.
They
put it off the state.
put it off one more year. We just received notice of that, I think, last Friday.
Oh, okay.
And does anyone know what the new president of the company's doing, besides sitting here at a meeting?
I have not
Oh,
met him.
yeah, Jerry Kavanaugh is the president of the Union Point project now, and is sort of managing that. And I meet with Jerry regularly, every Thursday morning. And so those discussions have been productive. The new management on site has been good to work with. They've been open, transparent, seem to understand the community responsibilities of this project pretty well, at least. And so I think that's going pretty well, but obviously there's a management struggle. So I'm not sure how much Jerry or anyone else, any of the other partners would feel comfortable speaking publicly about what they're doing. So.
That might become a problem at some point, because the public does need to know. The public needs to know what the water supply is,
Absolutely.
so on and so forth. And Elstar's financially responsible for procuring it and paying for it. And there's another issue. Everyone needs to know that you can't force Rockland to give water. That's already been a court case. So in terms of us having any responsibility, it's basically up to the developer. And in terms of the town of Rockland, if it went bust, we know what we would have to do, not a problem. And the issue of them owning land and then not being the master developer is another issue.
Right, okay. I think most of that is anything that we can really address. And I don't mean to be, it's just this board just doesn't have that, you know, we just.
Oh, I'm not asking you to do anything, I'm just letting you know that these are the things that are out there.
It's not, oh, all right.
Because if you watch the meetings, they're very short and not very informative.
Oh, okay, well, thank you. And I do meet with Paul, I just want the board to know that I do meet with Paul, and he's very good, very informed. He's informed on a lot of stuff.
I know we talked about the next meeting, I just want to make you aware that I'll probably be addressing the revenue side of things with the board of directors at that December 5th meeting.
Okay.
I don't know how you feel, typically you just do the appropriations. I don't know if you feel like you need to address the revenue prior to that. I'm just making you aware of the fact that that will be addressed at this time.
I don't think we're gonna have to.
That's fine.
Need to, yeah, that's not anything we need to do.
Okay.
Okay, so I just would like to wait, Paul, do you think just to hold off on a meeting date? Okay,
Because it's unclear when things are gonna happen. So
okay. Is that okay with everybody? Okay.
Christmas is coming.
Christmas is coming, that's right. Okay. I want to wish everybody happy Thanksgiving too, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you. Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So,
Second.
All those in favor?
all right.